Hello everyone, I'm Siddharthan. Recently, I have been posting videos on different deployment techniques for machine learning models. We have seen how we can train a machine learning model and deploy it as a simple web app using Streamlit library. And we have also seen how we can use the Python library called as FastAPI in order to expose these trained models as APIs and use it for our application. And we have also discussed how we can improvise this by dockerizing these Streamlit apps and APIs that we have created for these models. So in the last video, I have shown you how you can build a Docker image and then create a Docker container for these fast API that kind of uses the trained models and use it from your local. In this video, let's understand how we can Dockerize these APIs and deploy it on a cloud service like Microsoft Azure so that it can be used from a remote environment, or you can kind of integrate this with a user interface or even from an Android application. So that's the agenda for today's video. And before getting into the coding aspects, I would like to quickly tell you about my channel's membership that I have recently started. So you can check out the perks of the membership from this link that I gave in the description. So you will have perks such as yearly access to videos and access to exclusive videos and the PDFs of all the presentation slides that I have been using. So kindly check that out. And now let's understand how we can deploy this on Azure. So as I said, we have recently discussed how you can build a fast API endpoint with a trained model. I'll give the link for that video in this video description. You can kind of check that out if you want like a detailed understanding of that. I'll also probably give you a quick walkthrough of what we have over here. It's basically the same thing. So the initial part of building the Docker image and the Docker container remains the same. The only additional step is connecting to our Azure portal, the Azure account, and creating the necessary resources and kind of building this Docker container there. Okay, so it's okay if you don't understand few of these jargons, so you'll probably like pick that up throughout the course of this particular video. So let's get started. So this is the folder structure that I have over here, and I strongly suggest you to try PyCharm so that you can kind of have a clear structure over here, and you can also access terminal which we are going to use. So it's like a really good IDE that you can consider using. So I'll also give you these code files in GitHub repository. So I'll give the link for this repository in my video description. You can check that out, and you can kind of use the same folder structure that I have over here, right? And here I have a requirements file that has this request library, and this is used to test our deployed API. Okay, so I would suggest you to first install the required libraries from this requirements file. So you have two requirement files. One is within this app folder, and the other one within this default working directory, which is this one, Jan 24 video recording. So this is my project folder, and within this I have an app folder, which is basically the files that I need in order to build my Docker container, right? So first I'll just like install the libraries. For this you can simply run pip install r requirements.txt. So you can clone this repository, you can kind of fork it and use it. So you have requirements.txt. So first I'll run this. So when I say pip install requirements.txt, this file will be kind of taken into consideration, and the request library will be installed. So I've already installed it, as you can see it, and then probably run this pip install our app requirements.txt. So it's not that it's kind of necessary for you to install this requirements.txt. So the reason that I have over here is this is required for our Docker container. But before going into that, we need to make sure that this code, this main.py file, basically contains a code in order to load your model and build the API. So we need to test if this works. So for that we need libraries such as FastAPI, Pydantic, and so on. So these are the things that I mentioned in the requirements file that's present in this app directory. Okay, so I'll also run this in order to run the other libraries as well, to install the other libraries, which is in this app folder that I mentioned here, and this requirements.txt. So previously it's pip install r requirements.txt, and now from this working directory I need to go to this app directory. So I'm saying pip install r app/requirements.txt. So this should install the libraries such as FastAPI, Pydantic, and so on. So as you can see, I've already installed it. So for you this may take like, let's say, a few minutes. Okay, so first let's make sure this code is working, and this is like the diabetes prediction model that we have already worked on. I've also given that particular dataset and the notebook file in this folder itself. So you can see it over here. So you have a data folder and the notebook folder that you can use. You can also run it in order to generate the pickle file, or you can kind of use the one that I have like given you in this repository. Okay. So this is like a basic code. If you want kind of like a more improvised model, you can probably do some hyperparam tuning, do a kind of class distribution and so on. So this dataset kind of has some uneven class distribution, so you probably can try those things in order to get like more accurate predictions out of the model. So first is that step. So first we have trained a machine learning model, and we have saved that in this app directory in a folder called as train model. So probably I'll show it to you in PyCharm. So we have this app directory where we have this main.py file, which is basically we are going to use in order to build the APIs, and here we have a folder called as train model, and here I have saved the model that I have trained in that notebook. So we have this diabetes_model.pkl. Okay, so now let's maybe go through the code of this fast API thing quickly. So first I have like imported all these libraries. So if you want a detailed explanation, you can definitely check out my previous video that I'm going to give the link in the description. So there I've explained all these things in detail. So first we are loading this fast API class, and then we are mentioning how our input variables is going to be. So we have pregnancies, integers, glucose integer, blood pressure, and all these things. So all these things should be passed on to our API endpoint in order to get the prediction. And then we are loading our model to this variable called as diabetes_model using pickle.load. We have this trained model. So this is now the working directory is app is the working directory, and now I'm going to say trained model / diabetes_model.pkl. Right, I'm reading this and then I'm saying app.post. So this is a post API. So other usual kind of endpoint, or sorry, the API that we use is get API, where you kind of call that and you get some output out of this. So in the post we are going to pass this data as a JSON and get the prediction from it, whether the person is diabetic or not, right? So we have this input parameter which corresponds to this model input we have over here, and then from this input parameter that the user kind of passes, we kind of get the pregnancies to this variable, glucose to this variable, and so on. And then we create an input list and pass this to our trained model and get a prediction using this predict functionality, right? So we pass this, we put this list within a list to say that this is for a single data point and get the prediction. So if the prediction is 0, we are going to say the label is 0 and the result is the person is not diabetic. And if the else condition is nothing but your prediction is going to be 1. So it's a binary classification, so you will have either 0 or 1. So if it's not 0, it's going to say it's 1 and the person is diabetic, and we are going to return the result. So here I'm returning the result as kind of a JSON that has this label and result key. You can also like change this and use it like however you want. So ideally how this will be used is, let's say you have some UI application, let's say that there is some UI thing that's running, and you give the UI person the API and the required input parameters to them. So they will probably like kind of integrate that with their system, and then they call this API, and they should like kind of taken the input from the user who is accessing that UI, and we just like return the output as one, as let's say diabetic or something. So with that label they can show some diabetic image or something. So it can be anything. So it's not like you're building this on Streamlit, right? So it can be more advanced, like complete front-end tools, right? So that's how this is usually used. So this is our API that we have created. So first let's make sure that this is working well before kind of dockerizing this. So for this I'll open my terminal and I need to go to this app directory. So I'll say cd app in order to go to that particular directory, and now I'm going to use the command uvcon space main : app. So this main is nothing but the name of this Python file that we have over here, where we are using this fast API in order to create the API, and this app is nothing but the variable that we have over here. Okay, so this is the fast API application. So I'll say uvcon main : app. So you just have to run this. Now this will give you the URL in order to access it. So now this is running only in my local. Let's say if I have the UI code in my local system and I give this particular URL there, it's going to work, but again people can't access it from remote, right? Because this is still on local. So I'll probably go to this link. So this says detail not found. That's because you have a endpoint that is nothing but this diabetes prediction, right? So you need to put that endpoint and need to pass these kind of like input parameters in order to get the output. So the other thing or other way to kind of make sure that this API is working well is, right, so you can just put a slash after this URL and say docs. So this will open this Swagger thing, and now you can see this diabetes prediction endpoint, which is this post API. So you can expand it and say try it out. So here this is the input parameters that we have mentioned over here. Yeah, now I'll just like randomly give some values and see if the code is working. So let's say the pregnancy is 2 and the glucose level is 100 and blood pressure is like 115 or something, and skin thickness is 10. I don't know if these are like valid values for some of the parameters, but let's just go with some random values. For diabetes pedigree function, it should be a float, so I'll use 254 or something, and the age, let's say that person is 30 years old. Let's call this execute, and now this will say the result. So this is my result. So code is 200, that means it doesn't have any errors, and it kind of it's basically a successful response. It's what like code 200 means, right? And we have the response as label of 0 and the person is not diabetic, and this is the URL I need to kind of call in order to use this API. So now what I'm going to do is use this API from Python in order to make sure this is working. So that's why I have this testing ML underscore API thing. So in this file, we are going to test our ML API. So I have this JSON library and request library, which we have already installed. So JSON should kind of come pre-installed with Python. So you don't have to put that in the requirements. If you put it, it's probably going to create some issues because like there will be some version conflicts and other things that would happen. So just put request in this requirements that you have in the base directory. And I'm creating a dictionary called as input data, and I'm passing this pregnancy value, glucose value, blood pressure, and all those things, right? And I have this URL, so I need to paste the URL that I got from here. So this is basically my URL, and then this is the endpoint diabetes prediction, right? The other good thing about this is you can basically have multiple post APIs or even get APIs, right? So let's say that you have another art disease prediction. You can create another app.post and have art disease underscore prediction. So it's basically like you have two endpoints in one API, and one is for diabetes and the other one is for art disease detection. So you can basically do that as well. So when I kind of call this, right, so this is for diabetes prediction, and if I want to call the art disease, I can kind of use this, right? So this is a URL, and I'm kind of creating or converting this dictionary into a JSON with JSON.dumps, because that's the data that this kind of URL requires. Now I'm using this variable called as response, and I'm calling this request.post, and you mention this URL over here and say that this is the data that I'm passing, which is the data that my model requests in the API. So I'm printing the text of this response. So this should say whether the person is diabetic or not, right? So some output should be there. So let's maybe run this. Right now it says label is 0 and the result is the person is not diabetic, right? So I mean, I'm not looking at whether it says the person is diabetic or not. I just want to make sure that it returns some output, either 0 or 1, to make sure that everything is working well, like code wise nothing is breaking, right? So that's what we are interested in. So I'll close this, and I can stop this API with just Ctrl+C, or basically you can kind of terminate that thing from your terminal itself. Now I'll close this. I know this is working. Again, this is just like a UBCon thing, right? So this is still not a Docker container. So now let's see how we can Dockerize this. So I'll also have this markdown file where I kind of mentioned the steps in order to do this particular video. So you can follow this in order to kind of understand this as well. So you can kind of watch the video, and side by side you can probably test the code as well. I'm sure that that's what most of you do as well, so that's okay. So the first step in order to do this deployment is to build the code, in our case, which is the fast API code, and the Docker file for this. So we have already built the code and we have tested it. Now we need to prepare this code and make sure that we have this Docker file that's required in order to create this Docker container. So I'll close this one. So now again, I've explained you about this Docker file. This is the same thing that we have seen in the previous video, so I'm not going to go in detail about this. Here basically Docker file contains the recipes of building a Docker image, like simply put, right? So it basically contains instructions for the things that the Docker image is going to need. So you have this Python thing, the Python version that we need, and here we are saying that copy all the contents of this app directory. So dot is nothing but this is like the default, or this is the directory where your Docker file is situated, right? So when I say copy dot, it copies all the contents that's present in the folder where this Docker file is present. So in this case, the Docker file is present in this app folder, and we are going to copy all those contents into another app folder. So now this is not the app folder that you have created. This is the app folder that will be present in your Docker container, right? So we are taking all the contents that's present along with this Docker file, or basically in the directory of this Docker file, and putting in the app folder of the Docker image, or you can think, let's say, Docker container, and changing this working directory to this app. Again, this app is from the Docker container. And then we are running this pip install r requirements.txt, which basically kind of installs scikit-learn, fast API, and uvcon, which we need, right? And now the next step is like exposing. This is the port on which our API is going to run, and then we have the command to run it, uvcon main app, and this is just to kind of map the port, right? So before, we don't have to do that when we ran it on local, but while dockerizing this, we are going to say that this is the port that I'm going to kind of work on, right? So this is our Docker file. Now it's really simple how you can kind of dockerize this. If you are working on Linux, make sure that you have installed Docker in your system, so you can access it directly from terminal. For Windows and Mac, you can again install Docker and work on terminal, which is the best way, or maybe like a better way. The other thing is like probably like installing a Docker desktop, which is like a really good graphical user interface in order to manage your containers and images. But I would not kind of suggest you that, because let's say if you're working on a server or something where you don't have that luxury in order to install the GUI, right? So you probably could have like better experience working on the terminals instead of going for the GUI. I mean, that's just like my perspective, and it's up to you, right? So just open Docker desktop, start the Docker engine, and then you can run these on terminals. And also make sure that I'm going to run the commands as administrator, so I'd be using sudo command in Linux. If you are working on Windows, you have to kind of run your PyCharm as administrator, and then like run these codes, basically run these terminal commands that I'm going to do, because this requires the admin access thing. I'm not sure about Mac, but Mac users probably know that how to kind of run that as administrator, so probably you can figure that out. So now let's build our Docker image. So I'll say Docker, so I need to say sudo Docker build. So make sure that you are in this app directory where your Docker file is situated. So that's the directory from which you need to work on. So I'll say sudo Docker build t. So I'm going to tag it with name. So let's call this as diab pred YAML API. And you can put a colon and mention the version as v1.0. Okay. And put a space and put dot. So this dot is nothing but, again, we are in the app directory, and dot is basically like you need to mention the directory in which your Docker file is situated. So let's say that if you have another folder, another subfolder, and you have Docker file over there, you need to mention that particular directory name to say that this is where my Docker file is. So this dot is like really important. So I'll run this. So this will ask for my password as I run this on sudo. And now this kind of goes through this Docker file and run all the instructions that's present in this Docker file. So you can see first it kind of takes Python 3.10 slim version, and then it copies the contents, which is the second command out of the 4 commands, and then we have this working directory, pip install, and so on, right? So this is how this would work. So now this is basically building my Docker image. So you can think about, I mean, I often use this analogy to explain this Docker file, Docker images to people. So you can just think about it as like Docker file as like, let's say, a plan in order to manufacture a car, and let's say it contains all the recipes, or you can think about like the steps in order to build a car or manufacture a car. And Docker image, you can think about it as the infrastructure to build that car, right? And where it has like all the machines required in order to manufacture the parts and the things to assemble the car. So you basically have this Docker image, which is like a manufacturing plant, and from that plant you can kind of manufacture several cars, like individual cars. So with this Docker image, we can create Docker containers out of this, right? And this Docker container we are building will contain like the API that we need, which is like a trained model. So all we are interested in is having this Docker container. In order to have that, we need that recipe, which is our Docker file. So from this Docker file, we create Docker image, and from this Docker image, you can basically create any number of Docker containers, right? So maybe that's one analogy you can use, or you can refer other analogies, which kind of helps you to understand this better, right? So you can see as this has built my Docker image. again, if you're working on Windows, you can open Docker desktop and you can see like the images that has been built, so you can do that. If you're working on terminal, you can just say sudo docker images, so this will list the Docker images that you have. So it says that created about a minute ago, the name, right, diapred ML API, and this is the tag. This is my image ID, so my Docker image has been built. Now what I'm going to do is basically create a Docker container and make sure that again that URL works as well. So I'm going to say sudo docker run. So this is to create this Docker container from this Docker image. So you need to say docker run -p. So we have mapped our port, right? So we need to do that here as well. So we have p, which basically for this port mapping, and I'll say 80:80, and I need to call this image. So you can either use this basically this name, which is diapred ML API, and make sure that you're using this tag, which is v1.0, right? And this should work. Let's see. Right, so now my Docker container has been created, which has been built from this Docker image. So this is the URL. So I'll copy this URL. Again, if you are on Windows, this URL is not going to work. You need to kind of use the local host. Just type localhost here, and from there you can access it. So probably like put the localhost there. Oh, sorry, I think the URL is not copied. Maybe I can just click it. Right, so this is the port that I have, and I'll say docs again. Again, if you're on Windows, just say localhost/docs. So this will open this. Again, you can basically try it out with some, again, those values, right? So I'll say again 200. Blood pressure is 150. Skin thickness is 10. Insulin is 100. BMI is, let's say, 26. Diabetes predictive function, let's put it as 0.354 or something. Age, let's say 30, right? So I'll execute this. So still now you can see that it's a 200 successful response, and we have this output as well. Now this is, I mean, the working, everything is same as what we have seen, but previously we have just ran a Python script with uvcon, right? But now what happens is we are running a Docker container, and within the Docker container we have this API thing, which is like a more standard way, so that you have all the dependencies for this application in one place, right? And you can share this image to someone so that they don't have to install dependencies separately, and they can kind of test it or do whatever they want with it, right? So the other thing that you can do is push this Docker image to Docker up, you can share it with others and so on. So now I have this URL that you can see. So I'll copy this, and again probably I'll test it with this testing ML API thing. So this container is running. Make sure that your container is running. If you stop it, it's not going to work. So now I'll run this again. Now it says the result, it says label 0, the person is not diabetic, and so on. So what we have done now is we have tested our fast API code with the trained model, and we have also kind of Dockerized this API as a Docker container, and we have kind of tested it as well. The next step is how we are going to push this Docker image to Azure, and how we are going to deploy a Docker container there, because still we are working on local, but we need a remote URL that people can use. Let's say you're working in the machine learning team, or let's say the DevOps team, and you need to kind of give this to the person who is building the front end, right? So what you will basically do is give this URL and this parameters, they will use it, right? So let's say that we are going to use Azure as the cloud provider. So the steps is like pretty same for AWS as well. So you just build this Docker container, push this to, I think in AWS you call this as ECR. So I'm not sure, you can check it once. So it's Elastic Container Registry. In Azure you call this as Azure Container Registry. So there also you push this image, build the container and run it. Here also the process is same. So now let's see how we can do that. But before that, I'll come to this terminal. I'll stop this container that I ran. Now I can see the list of container that is running with sudo docker ps. So this will just say that nothing is running because I have stopped it. If you want to see all the containers that is not even running, right? So that has been inactive, but it's still there. You can say sudo docker ps -a. So this is the one that we have just deployed right now, right? So the Docker container, this is the ID. So let's say that you have 10 Docker containers, and you're not going to use it, right? So in that case, you can just say sudo docker container prune. So this will delete all the Docker containers that's present in your system. So it will ask for confirmation, and say yes. you can run this sudo docker psa again. You don't have this, right? But you still have this docker image, so you can check it from sudo docker images. So if you want, you can again create another docker container from this image with the docker run command, right, with this image id and so on. So now let's come back to this markdown. So first we have built the code for our API for our trained model. We have also built the docker file, and we have also built the docker image and container for it. The next step is how we are going to deploy it on Azure. So for this you need like few things to be kind of done. These are basically the prerequisite. So you can maybe create Azure account. You can maybe try it with free account, but I've been kind of testing this code before recording this video. It didn't cost me that much. It's just only like 4-5 Indian rupees or something, which is like pretty less, right? So you can create a free account. If not, you can probably have a pay as you go as well, but make sure that you are deleting the resources that you are not using. Otherwise it's going to cost you a lot. So be careful whenever you're creating some resource on cloud. So you probably know that. It's just like a caution from me, right? So that is all. So make sure that you have an account on Azure with a proper subscription, and then install Azure CLI, the command line thing, in your system, so that you can kind of access Azure from your system itself. So that's other thing. So I mean, you can refer to documentations and videos online, so you'll probably like find a lot. So it's not like a complex process. So you need Azure CLI to be installed, and then you also need Docker. So I guess this step you should have already done in order to build the Docker image and containers and so on. So these are the prerequisites. So first build the code, Dockerize this and so on. So you probably would have installed Docker already. Create an Azure account and install Azure CLI in your PC. Okay, the next step is we are going to create a resource group. So in Azure we have several resources, right? So storage accounts are one resources where you kind of store some some kind of files or like whatever data that you have, and there are also like other machine learning services and so on. There are like several resources, and all these resources need a resource group. So in a resource group, you, let's say you have like all the resources that a project needs, and you put all those in a single resource group, right? So you can kind of use it for that. And you can say, let's say you can see the building of all the resources that is present in one resource group. So this is not just the single use, like there are other uses, but I'm just giving you like a overview of what a resource group is. And then you have this Azure container registry. So these are the things that we are going to create now from Azure portal. So we are first going to create a resource group, and in this resource group we are going to create another resource, which is Azure container registry, which is like the repository for our Docker image. So then we'll be pushing this Docker image that we have built to this container registry and building a Docker container from there. So these are the next step. So I'll show you how you can do that. So by this point, I hope that you have created your Azure account and you have some proper subscription for you. Now you can just go to create a resource and say, I want to create a resource group. So you can see this resource group over here. So we have, this is the icon for it. So I'll click it. So this will take me to the resource group options and give create. Right, so this is my subscription, which is pay as you go, and now I need to name this. You can see the naming conventions over here. So I'll call this as let's say diabetes prediction model. I'll call this short as diapred model, diapred ML model. I'll also maybe put RG to mention that this is the resource group name, and I'm going to, you can choose maybe region that's appropriate for you, the one that's closer to your customers. So here, I mean, we don't have any customers, so I'm just going to, you can also research on which region kind of gives you like lesser pricing. So I'm going to go with Central India, which is basically close to me. Right, so I don't have any issues. If there are any issues with the naming and so on, you kind of see it here, and this is the green tick, which is okay. Now I go to tags. You can just leave this as such. You don't have to change anything basically. So this validation has been passed. Now I have to give this create. So now this will create my resource group, and this is the name of I can basically see that from here. So I'll refresh this once. This will show the resource group here, or I can also go to this resource group tab and I can see like the resource group that have been created. Oh, seems it's not created. Interesting. Okay, so we'll try creating it again. I think may have missed something over here. So diapred ML model RG. Same. Okay, it says already exists. I think it's some refresh issue that I faced, so it should be over here soon. Right, so you can see this is the one that we have created first, right? So this is the resource group, and this is the resource group that we will select in order to create our Azure container registry, right? So I'll come back to the portal. I'll go to home, and I can search for a container registry. Say container registry. So this is the resource that we'll be using. So again, I don't have anything over here, so I'll give create. So make sure that you are deleting all these things once you're done, right? So here I can either create a new resource group, or I can choose the one that I've just created, which is diapred ML model RG. Again, there are some conventions you need in order to name this. So this is the registry name. I'll call this as diapred. I think this won't allow me to have hyphens. Can just have alphanumeric things. So I'll say diapred ML model, diapred ML model. Right, so this is available, right? Maybe I'll also, yeah, I don't have to say CR because we already have CR over here. So this is our registry name, diapred ML model dot Azure CR.io. So this is something that we need later. So take a note of this, or I mean, we can see it somewhere else as well. So that's okay. So these are like the common kind of suffix for this, for the registry name, and the location is like the same as the resource group that we have over here. You don't have to give the availability zones. You can have standard, premium, or basic. So I'll just go with the basic pricing, just considering the pricing in mind. I'll go to networking. You can just leave these assets. So we have this public access things, tags, and so on. So I mean, if you want advancing, you can research about this and give this name, tag, and value. It's better to have like a more complete system. So I'll go to this review and create. So it says the validation is passed. So now I can create this. These are the two steps that we need to do on portal. One is creating the resource group, and the other one is creating the Azure container registry. So first we have a resource group and then a container registry. Now I'll come back to this. Now let's see what we have to do. So I've created this portal. The next step is using Azure CLI, right? The command line interface thing. I need to connect to my Azure account. So for that, you can use this AZ login command. So I've mentioned all these in the step. So we have done all the steps that we have mentioned over here. Now we have to do this AZ login. This is going to log into Azure. So I've already logged in. So this will basically ask you for your password and other things. So you can basically do that. And the other thing is there is another way. Like let's say that again, as I said, you are working on some server or something, or I mean in some machine that in which you don't have access to a browser, right? In that case, what you can basically do is there are several ways to log in. There is another one called as a device code login, where you kind of run that particular device code command, and this will give you a URL and a device code as output. Now you kind of, let's say, use your mobile phone or another PC. You go to that URL and paste that code over there. So now you will be logged in this particular terminal thing. So that's how it works. So there are like several ways to log in. I'll just use this AZ login, which will basically open a browser and authenticate your login thing. So once we have logged into this Azure account, we need to log into this Azure container registry, right? So we have created container registry. So think about this as you are working in a company, so that has like, I mean, they probably would have like multiple Azure accounts, and may not have multiple Azure accounts, but they definitely would have like different subscriptions, and your team may be given a particular subscription, right? And in that you need to create all these container registries and so on, right? So for some cases you would have permission, and in some cases you probably need to connect to IT and have them create that for you. So I mean, it differs from company to company and how they are managing it, right? The next step is, again, there is a company, let's say there are different subscription, and you just need to log into your container registry. So that's what we are going to do, and for that I'm going to use the command Azure ACR, which stands for Azure Container Registry login name, this thing. So I'm going to say, so for this, right, you need two things. One is the username for this container registry, which is just the name that we have given, and the password for this. And this is like a tricky step. So in order to get this username and password, go to your Azure portal, go to your container registry that you have created, and in the left side tab, right, you have this access keys app options. So you can go over here. If you are admin user, you can just click here and you can get basically the username and password for it. Again, if you are not the admin, again you have to probably connect to your IT and get all these details from them, or you can also probably create this access tokens, which is like a more secure way. So this is just my personal account, so I'm just going to delete this registry after this. So for me that's okay. Or the other option is, right, so we can have this access control, IAM, which is identity access management. You can go over here and you can kind of add another role assignment, which kind of streamline the permissions that you want to give, like what they can do with that container registry, whether they can pull, whether they can push an image, build something, right? So all these happens in this role management. So I mean, I'm going to give myself the admin role and go with it. Probably if your better way to be is just to create a IAM role, so you can have this contributor or owner thing, you can like give the appropriate access to this and work on it. Okay, so that's the other thing. So here I'll come over here, have this access keys ready. So I need to put this username and password when I log in from this terminal command, right? So I'll say sudo azacr login, and I need to give the name of this registry, which is yeah, this is my registry name. I'll give this over here. So sudo azacr login. If you are working on some other project or something, right, I hope you know this, so you just like replace the name over here. So I'll say sudo azacr login double hyphen name, and I'll paste this, which is diapred ml model, right? So I'll run this. Now you need to paste your username and password over here. I'll come back to my portal, copy this username and paste it. It should be the same as the name of your container registry. And for password, I'm going to copy this and paste it over here. So I've pasted it, we press enter. So this will log in and this will save your password. And again, this is not like the more secure way, so I would suggest you to look for another option, but just for quick demo, I just want to do this, right? So now we have connected, or we have basically logged into our Azure container registry as well. So now the next step is pushing our Docker image that we have built on our local to this container registry that we have created, right? So for that, you can use this command. So before that, I need the name of the Docker image that I have created. So for that, I can again put this sudo docker images command that will list the name. So I have this image ID. So you can use either image ID or this name as well as the tag, right? So for this, I need to kind of basically replace all the things that I have over here. So here I'll say sudo space docker space tag. You just need to put this image name, right? So this image name is the one that you have created on your local, not the not the one that you're going to push. So I'll copy this diab-pred ml API tag space this, and I need to put this tag as well, which is v1.0. you can see over here, space Azure container registry dot azure acr.io. This is basically your registry name, right? For this, I can basically go here. You can kind of see this. This is the login server. This is the one that you need to give over here. So your registry name dot azure cr.io is the one that's present over here. So I'll copy this. You can paste it here, or you can just put your name, registry name, and see azure acr.io thing. Put a slash after this and give the name that you want to give in your registry. So I'll call this as, let's say, diab ml, or I'll call this as diab ml-pred ml API Azure, right? So this is the name of the image that is going to be created or pushed to your Azure container registry. So I'll call this. So this is what I have given it. So this image name, first name that you're seeing, is the name of the image that you have in your local. So I'll run this. Right, so this has been tagged. So how you can check this is, again, run this sudo docker images. So first you have this diab-pred ml API, the one that you have created on local. The next one is the one that we have kind of tagged to Azure container registry, right? The next step is we have tagged it. Now we are going to push it to this Azure CR, the container registry thing. So for that, you can use this sudo docker push command. So I'll say sudo docker push space Azure container registry name Azure acr.io, which is basically this. So I've told you, right? But basically, like, you need to give your Azure container registry name dot azure acr.io slash the name of the image that you have created for your Azure registry, right? Which is basically what you're seeing here, right? So you just can basically copy this and paste it over here. So we have diab-pred model Azure, all these things, slash diab-pred ml API Azure. So I'll run this. So this is kind of getting pushed to Azure Container Registry right now. So once this has been pushed, right, so we will create a Azure Container instance. Again, this is another resource that we'll be using. So this, we have created a container in our local, right? So similarly, this will create and deploy a container on Azure. And for that, we'll be using a resource called as Azure Container Instance. There is another kind of service. I think its name is Azure Kubernetes service, where you can probably, Azure Container Instance doesn't give you GPU resource and other things. So probably if you are going to kind of have a cluster or something, or if you're going to deploy a deep learning model, right? So probably container instance may not be the right one for you. You can go with Kubernetes service, but that's going to cost you a lot, like way lot than what your container instance is going to have, right? But our focus is not Kubernetes thing. We're just going to stay with Azure Container Instance for now. So here I'll say AZ. So the next step is like creating the container instance after pushing it. So you can also check the container that has been pushed from this, yeah, not in the overview, but from this repositories thing. You can go to this repositories and you see this diab pred ML API Azure, and you see this latest. So this is the one that we have created, right? So you can basically see it. So I'll come back. Okay. The next step is creating this Azure container. So Azure container instance. So I'll say just replace the names you have over here. So you have AZ container. So make sure that you're not making any typo, any spelling mistakes or something, so that's going to throw an error. So I have AZ container create space double hyphen resource hyphen group, and I need to put the name of the resource group. This I can see from this overview, and I can copy this resource group from here, right? So diapred ML model hyphen RG. So I have this resource group over here, space, I have this name and container name. So this name basically corresponds to the container name. And again, since now till now we haven't created our container, so you can just create any name that you want. So I'm going to call this as diab pred ML API container / image. So here you need to give the name of the image that you have in Azure. So I'll give this image space, which is basically what you have over here / this thing, right? Or registry name Azure I hope, basically what you have over here, that the one that you have tagged. So I'll give it, probably I'll give this latest, which is the tag it says. You can see it over here, right? So latest is the tag. It's given v1, but use whatever tag you have over here, right? And then I need to give a DNS name label. So DNS, I mean, you also need to make sure that kind of like it's unique. There is like no other DNS with this thing, right? So for me, I'm going to use okay, DNS hyphen name hyphen label. DNS label name going to be, let's say, diabetes prediction ML API. So I just hope that there are like, I mean, this is just available. So let's see if that's the case. And then you just need to say space port, because this is the port that we have mentioned over there, right, which is 80. So now I'll run this. Image registry username, again come back to your registry, go to your access keys or however the way you are logging in. So I'll copy this username, I'll paste it here, and I'll come back and I'll paste the password. You can regenerate the password if you want, if you think that that password has been compromised. So now this should basically create your container instance with the name yeah, diab pred ML API container, and we should see this DNS thing. And once this is run, right, we are going to run this in order to get the URL, the FQDN, which stands for fully qualified domain name, and that's the API, or basically the URL that we are going to use in order to access our trained model. So this is how you can basically Dockerize your trained model. So we have basically created an API out of this trained model. We have Dockerized this, and here we are basically pushing that to Azure Container Registry and creating a container out of that with Azure Container Instance. So now it's creating this. You can basically see this from the resource as well. So I'll search container instance. You can see container apps is now done. So container instances. So you can see this one is getting created. Once this is done, we should see the confirmations over here. I think you can click. still click this, and this is the FQDN. So this is the one that we are going to use. So you can basically come to portal and get this. And the other way is right. Yeah, I think it seems it ran. The other way to get this URL or this FQDN is right. Just paste this command. So use AZ container show hyphen resource group, and my resource group name is, I can get it from here in this container instance thing itself. Resource group name space hyphen name container name, where my container name is this one. I'll paste it over here, and query space, and you can just copy and paste this thing, so this won't change. So this is just to get that FQDN, but again the simple step would be to get it from the portal. I'll run this. Yeah, this is my FQDN, which you have basically seen over here, right? So now I can copy this, paste it here, and again this is going to say detail not found, but I can go to docs and use the particular endpoint, which is diabetes prediction, and access it. So I'm going to say /docs, right? So I'll expand it. Now I can see it. I'll just try it out again with some random values of 3, 150 or something, blood pressure of 100, skin thickness of let's say 10, insulin of 50 or something, BMI of let's have a large BMI, pedigree function is 0.587 or something, age is let's say 60. I have some larger values, but let's see. So it says 1, and it says the person is diabetic, as we had like some large values for glucose and other things. Okay, so it seems this is working, and this is the URL that you need to use: http diabetes prediction mlap.centralindia.azure-container.io diabetes prediction. So I'll copy this. Again, as you can see, previously this testing ML API would have worked only on your system because this is running on your local, right? But you can also, maybe to test it out, create a collab notebook, put that URL over here and see if that works. So that is how you can make sure that it runs on local things as well. So other things won't change because it's basically the same API, only the place in which we have deployed it will change, right? Yeah, you have diabetes prediction things under India, all those things. The endpoint is also mentioned, which is diabetes prediction. Now I'm going to run this. So this should give me whether the person is diabetic or not. So this says that label is 0 and the person is not diabetic. Okay, so this is how you can deploy your trained machine learning model as an API, but as a Docker container on Azure. So if you are kind of passing this to an UI person, right, maybe there are few other things that you need to make sure, whether the course is enabled for that particular URL and other things, but probably those are like other simple things. So I think that is all from my side in this video. I'll just give you a quick recap of what we have done. So I'll just maybe use this markdown file itself. So for the first thing that we have did is make sure that you have installed the Docker. Probably that's the one that should have came first, right? So make sure that you have installed Docker or Docker desktop for Windows and Mac, and build your code, which is the API for our trained model. Build the Docker file and build your Docker image and Docker container and test it out in your local. Make sure that nothing is breaking in your code, everything is fine and it's ready to be deployed on Azure. And then the next step is make sure that you have an account in Azure and you have a proper subscription that allows you to create, let's say, a resource group, container registry, container instance, whatever we have seen, right? So you have the permissions to do that. And once that is done, we are going to create a resource group and Azure container registry from Azure portal. And then we are all going to kind of use the terminal commands that we have. First, we are logging in with AZ login command. This should open a browser and it should authenticate it. Next, we are logging into Azure Container Registry. So for username and password, you can go to access keys tab on the left side pane, and you can from there get the username and the password, or probably use some other access token, which is like a better way. So I've just gone with admin. You can probably ask your IT manager in order to create some user roles, IAM roles for you, right? So once you have logged in, you see the images that you have, and then tag the image with the local. This is basically the local image that we have created, and tag it with the Azure image that you have. Next again, list the Docker images, push it to Azure Container Registry with this command sudo docker push thing, and then you create a Azure container instance with this command, replace all the names you have over here, and then you can get the URL by using this particular command. Okay, so that is all from my side for this video. The last step, but it's really important thing to do, is after all this testing and so on, let's say you're not going to use it, you can stop it, but if you don't want to incur any cost, just go ahead and delete the container instance. So this is deleting my container instance. So once this is done, I need to delete all the resources that I've created. The other resource that I've created is this container registry, so I'm not going to use this image again. So if you are going to use, that's okay. Let's say if you're on your company's kind of Azure account, and if it's okay to have that image and that instance running, you can probably don't have to delete that, you can stop it. I think even stopping it will incur a cost, but that should be minimum, so I'm not sure about it. Please kind of verify that once. But yeah, deleting it should kind of like shouldn't incur any cost. If you are working on a personal account, I would suggest you to delete all the things that we have done. So the last thing is deleting the resource group. So deleting the resource group may take like 2 or 3 minutes. Copy this and paste it over there. So yeah, once you have, sorry, this one. So once you have deleted it, make sure that no resource is running on your Azure account, so that we have done all the cleanup properly, right? So this is how you can deploy the model on Azure as a Docker container as an API. So again, the steps are pretty similar for AWS as well. So you probably create a registry and Elastic Container Registry in AWS, and basically deploy your container as some of the instance that you have. Like some resource should be available in AWS. So I'll probably make a video on that, but I think for some time I would probably put that for members, so you can check out membership. So I haven't posted any videos yet in the membership, so but I'm planning to kind of post more to that as well. So make sure that you check it as well, right? So I think you are clear with all the contents that we have discussed. Yeah, that's it from my side, and I'll see you in the next upload. Thanks for watching.